I'd like to welcome everyone to the Planning Advisory Committee for the Town of Quispamsis for Tuesday, June 27th. Item number 2, approval of agenda. Any amendments to the agenda? Changes? None being, can we have a motion? Approve the agenda, please. Brent? Have a seconder in that? Mr. Bishop?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Can we have a vote, please? Motion's carried unanimously. With that being, we'll move on to item 3, disclosures of interest. Is there any? None being, we'll move on to item 4, approval of previous minutes. Is there any amendments to the previous minutes? None being, can I have a motion to approve previous minutes, please? Mr. Bishop,
So moved.
can I have a seconder on that? Kendall?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Can we have a vote, please, on that motion? Motion carried unanimously. With that being, we'll move on to item 5. Oops,
There's another,
what?
there's another motion?
That's where I'm going to, number 5.
Yeah, but I put it under previous minutes. Because it was in the minutes. Nope, okay, we only ever do the notice of decisions on that.
Yeah, we're gonna bring it up as another.
Okay,
What do we want to do? Want to amend the agenda then for what? Add where? Where do you want to add that item in? Okay, so what we're gonna do is add an item, the business arising from previous minutes for the regarding fencing?
the notes are right there under number 4.
Yeah.
It just should be under number 5.
Okay. So is there an agreement to add that to business arising from previous minutes? Can I have a seconder on that? We'll add that in, please. Mr. Bishop?
I'll second that.
All right. Can we vote on that, just to add that in?
Um,
We don't have to vote that. Okay, never mind. That being, we'll move on to item 5. Oh, there's a,
no, no,
that being, confusion, we'll go into business arising from previous minutes. And with that item, that was for fencing in the town of Quispamsis bylaw. So someone like to,
2 motions. One is that the notice of decisions be received and filed, and the other is the motion on the fences.
okay. So first one's first. Can we agree, I can have a motion to receive business arising from minutes? Mark Guest?
So moved.
Can I have a seconder on that? Brenda?
So moved.
Thank you. That being, we need a vote on that. That motion's carried unanimously. Next item arising from minutes is with respect to the fencing. So what we need to put forth is a motion to that to go for town staff to look into fencing. Brent, you want to kick that off?
PAC contact the town clerk with regards to direction as to what direction the town wants to go with regards to fencing, as in what parameters, which fences go where on a residential. For example, is it an animal control fence? Where's the application for that? If it's a chain link fence, where is that applicable? So basically, what direction does the town want to see fencing go in from a planning point and from a cosmetic or landscaping point of view? You can fix that up.
Thank you, Brent. Dwight, any comment on that?
Well, this time that would be motion of PAC and what they wish to see reviewed.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder on that motion? Brenda,
I'll second that.
any debate on that motion or any changes? Thank you. Can we have a vote on that, please? Motion carried unanimously. With that being, we'll move on to item 6, unfinished business. None being, we'll move on to item 7, new business. Item 7A, Executive Acres Phase 9. Could the applicant please come up to the podium and state their name for the record? But in the meantime, we'll get Dwight to introduce that item for us. Dwight?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is subdivision plan, Executive Acres Phase 9, that was previously considered by the Planning Advisory Committee, which a decision was rendered. It was in April of 2020. The developer has undertaken work in the particular subdivision with road construction and stormwater management. So at this stage, the developer was prepared to move forward with the process of Ascendant Council development agreements. However, because the plan has expired, then we need to bring it back for consideration of approval again. So in the staff report that's before Planning Advisory Committee, there was a note, there's an item that was not captured in the previous process, and that's with respect to a variance. There's a street separation requirement of 60 meters. But the plan proposes about approximately 47 meters separation between the proposed public street into Phase 9 and a future street on the opposite side of the road. So a 13-meter variance would be required. The location of the street is relative to obviously the topography and the grades in the area, which is an item that's identified in the subdivision bylaw as something the Planning Advisory Committee can look at in giving consideration to a variance of street separation. Again, I also note that when we look at the overall traffic at these particular intersections, this is a new street, as well as a future street is just that, it's a future street. There's nothing in terms of traffic on it at this stage, and we would anticipate that if there's any further development of the adjoining parcels, there would also be access out into the Menas Cove Road, so it wouldn't be like it's a sort of a thoroughfare on these streets. So I don't think traffic at this stage would be a concern in consideration of the variance. The other major item that has changed would be the undertaking of a wetland delineation that has been done and has been submitted, and a revised plan has been received. And what that indicates is that there was wetlands that were considered, that were found, they've been mapped, and they are presented on the plan. And there's also, in terms of the wetland, there is a wetland buffer that obviously encroaches upon some of the lots as they're previously approved. Over the past little while, it's one of the items that's been really sort of relayed in terms of towards development officers to really start to, take into consideration these unmapped watercourses and wetlands, and where there's evidence that these things exist, then obviously there is an onus to actually get them delineated and mapped and put on the plans accordingly. Obviously prior to the actual laying out and the design, so they can be taken into consideration. In the previous staff report back in 2022, within the report, it did mention that there was, prior to the land for public purposes being finalized, that a wetland delineation would be undertaken. Unfortunately, it didn't make it into the actual notice of decision that was presented, but it was included in the staff report that this is something that needed to be undertaken and considered. What does that mean? What it means is that in some cases, some of the lots are actually sort of, if you will, there's a constraint on them, which means they will have to involve obtaining a wall walls in terms of actually building. So at this stage, the developer would actually work with the Department of Environment to identify what those requirements would be. That is something that we would, from a development perspective and as a development officer in the planning department, we would have had to take that approach, whether the wetland delineation was done or not, because we have information that sort of indicates it does indicate there's potential of wetlands, so there's a requirement to have that identified as a development permit process. So, so at this stage, it's to be noted on the plan, and then it's working with the Department of Environment for those properties that are constrained by the wetland buffer. The general direction that's been provided by the Department of Environment is that the preference is to have all the lots having at least 4,000 square meters outside of the wetland and the buffer. In this particular case, that's the construction has been undertaken, and some of these lots are at the stage of being prepared to potentially be put on the market. So it's looking at what is those constraints in terms of being able to get wall walls to develop. So they have been granted in the past in terms of lots that are still constrained by a wetland buffer. It's making sure the house and all the necessities in terms of on-site septic and wells can be essentially outside that buffer area. Where there's been wetland that's been destroyed, obviously there's the ability to provide compensation to compensate for that, and then obviously the wetland is removed from the mapping and those constraints are eliminated as well. But at this stage, that's something that would have to be obviously worked with through the Department of Environment. Other than that, the previous conditions would apply. So it's looking at the street separation variance, as well as the street name and those types of requirements. That's it for me at this stage. If there's any questions, I'm open.
Thank you, Dwight. Could the applicant, can you move that mic in some for you, please, towards you? Please state your name for the record, please.
Bruce Robinson, I'm the developer.
Okay. Mr. Robinson, you would have received the same package we did in the mail. Anything you'd like to add or discuss prior to members of PAC or the public asking you some questions?
No, I think everything's fine. It's very clear in the staff report, and I believe we've done everything that's been asked of us to do, so.
Okay, thank you. Any members of PAC have any questions for the applicant? Brent?
Mr. Chairman, more so for staff with regard than the applicant. With everything that's happened in HRM in the last 6 weeks, you look at their planning and their subdivisions, everything that's kind of coming out preliminary. I guess, how do we, as a community or as a planning, the PAC, start to be proactive in our community to try to prevent some of that, the things that could be prevented down there, secondary roads, etc. This is the first subdivision we've had in front of us since HRM,
So I'm not clear on what was originally the first part of the comment or question. If you could repeat it.
Basically, Dwight, when we look at what's happened in HRM over the last 4 weeks with their fires and that, and when the things that came out, the subdivisions weren't prepared. They didn't have second access. The trees weren't, I shouldn't say the trees, some of that was personal, the way people did their personal property, but there was a lot of comments about people not having a second access. This is a very short road, it's easy to get out, but again, this is our first subdivision since HRM has happened, so I guess as the PAC, how do we proactively move forward to try to, so we can prevent what happened in HRM in our community?
So through you, Mr. Chair, subdivision bylaw identifies the length of a street. So it actually says, for example, if you have a cul-de-sac, it can't be any more than 183 meters. Once you have anything more than 183 meters, you start looking at for alternate access, not just so much for pedestrian movements, but also for that purpose, at least allowing some sort of access road or way out. Doesn't necessarily have to be a full-fledged street, but it's an alternate access route. So whether that's for pedestrian movement or in the case of an emergency, vehicles could exit through that particular location. So that's something as a planning advisory committee and also as staff from a planning perspective, that's things that we try to achieve. Obviously, in some cases, the topography of the land just doesn't support it. But again, the Community Planning Act and the subdivision bylaw gives PAC the authority to take that into consideration. They have the authority to say whether development is suitable for that particular location, both in terms of topography and whether they feel it maybe the level of development may be too much for that particular area if you can't meet those requirements. So those provisions are in place. It's sort of an unfortunate example of that type of thing that can happen, but it's something that the reason why we do aim for alternate access into our subdivision developments. So unfortunately, it's a timeline thing. Some of the ones that we're seeing right now in terms of access being connected have been subdivisions that have been sitting for, a number of years. So right now it's just sort of all coming together. So.
Okay, Brent?
Yep.
Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant from PAC? Members of PAC? None being, is there anyone in the audience or online willing to speak for or against this item? Is there anyone online or in the audience willing to speak for or against this item? Third and final time, is there anyone in the audience willing to speak for or against this item or online? None being, would a member of PAC like to put a motion for or against with terms and conditions, please? Mr. Bishop.
I'll put a motion forward that PAC approve the Executive Acres Phase 9 tentative plan with which progress is in the creation of 1 public street, 8 new building lots, and 1.37 hectare dedicated as land for public purpose. The public utility easement is seeking, I guess I don't need to do that. So item or recommendation 1, acceptance of the proposed street name Carlingford Drive. 2, approval of the LPP as presented on the tentative plan with the requirement for the completion of a wetland delineation prior to the approval of the final subdivision plan for the recommended options to satisfy LPP requirements. 3, the granting of a 13-meter variance from subdivision bylaw 035, specifications and guidelines, part 3, division A, section 123 CI, regarding the separation between street intersections and the remaining development officers' conditions as listed.
Thank you, Mr. Bishop. Would a member of PEC like to put a seconder on that, please? Brenda?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Any debate in that motion? None being, can we have a vote, please? Motion carried unanimously. In 5 to 7 business days, you'll have your letter in the mail. Please make sure you have all necessary paperwork in with the town and documentation, and best of luck.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. That being, we'll move on to item 7B, Queenberry Heights Subdivision Phase 15. Could the applicant please come up to the podium? Dwight, you want to introduce that item?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you to the Planning Advisory Committee. So the Planning Department has received a subdivision application for the creation of 11, not 19 lots. You can strike that from your staff report. Thank you, Mrs. Holly. Residential lots. This is a continuation sort of an overall plan that would have been before the Planning Advisory Committee under Phase 14. Phase 14 did include this particular area as is shown on the screen. As part of that sort of process, it was sort of grayed out as future development, and now has come to planning and to the Planning Department and Planning Advisory Committee as Phase 15. So it will create residential lots. The lots have all been reviewed with respect to the requirements under the zoning bylaw. They all meet the minimum requirements. for sewer service lots. Access will be provided through an extension of Montana Drive. The subdivision plan does include an extension of the future street, which will circle back around and refer to Mr. Preston's comment. So this is an instance of where we've created that future street for that particular access at this point in time. In the event for those types of things, we do have the right to enter onto that property and create that access. Stormwater sort of service will be by potable water, so drilled wells. I believe I am recommending an abbreviated study at this point in time. As I mentioned, sewer service would be through extension of municipal sewer service. We did look at the location of the lots relative to the existing sewage lagoon, as there is a requirement in the zoning bylaw that the dwellings must be more than 100 meters from a sewage lagoon or its facilities. In this case, it's approximately, if you take the center of lots, it's about 140, 150 meters away, so it meets that requirement. Stormwater management plan. Stormwater management plan would be obviously comprehensive. It's looking at using an open ditch system with the water being collected and conveyed into a stormwater retention area in the town of Quispamsis property. That was done as part of phase 14B. So that is in existence and will be used as part of the stormwater management for this particular subdivision. Land for public purposes, as part of the land for public purposes, would have been dedicated through phase 14B when there was land given between Queensberry Drive and Montana Drive. So that created a land bank credit, which can be used towards this particular subdivision development. Again, it's for protection of the drainage area through there, as well as sort of, if you will, a recharge area. Sort of the intent of protecting that area by providing it to the town. And I think that summarizes it. So at this stage, I'm looking for acceptance of the street layout as well as acceptance of the use of the land bank credit, and the developer ought to obtain approval from the Department of Environment as it relates to construction within a wetland buffer of some of the lots in the lower portion of Montana Drive.
Thank you, Dwight. Could you please state your name for the record, please?
Joe Roberts, land surveyor representing Bill Brooks.
Okay, thank you. You would have received the same package we did in the mail. Is there anything you'd like to add or discuss prior to have some questions from PAC or members of the public? Okay. What was your name again?
Bill Brooks.
Okay, Mr. Brooks. Thank you. Any members of PAC have any questions for the applicant? Brenda.
My question is about the berm that was built to retain the water. It's on Crisp property, but it's not been turned over to the town.
That's right.
Don't think it's doing what it should, because when it rains, it's muddy water coming down off that berm and into the ditch, and there's a cross culvert, and it can get through the cross culvert into the Salmon Creek, I think it's called, or Salmon Brook. Or there's a muddy water running down beside the berm. So if this is going to be used for this development also, it has to be improved so it was doing what it's supposed to be doing.
Right. We actually planted grass there 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
I'm curious. I haven't seen if it's starting to sprout up yet, but I haven't witnessed any dirty water coming out of the retention pond. We feed the
Coming off the berm.
oh, just from the berm itself.
And I would also see coming down through the woods like a muddy brook, and coming back down beside the berm.
Okay.
But I was not. Today be a good day to go out there, but it was too wet for me. So
I was last week. It was raining extremely hard, so I went down and checked it down where the opening that you can see in the berm where the bit of water trickles through.
and we videoed it. I think I sent it to Mark, and the
Okay.
water was clear then.
Okay,
But we did just plant grass on the whole berm. And as you look through the woods, that flat area that we accessed a road to get our equipment in, we grass that as well. So curious, it may be all washed
So
away
it's-
now.
I'll watch for the improvements, but again, I was not there doing that for the last couple of weeks. I've been walking elsewhere, so, but, you know, when it
We've done some
rains.
you did some ditching up in the subdivision as well. We had a breakage of one of our dams up on Montana Drive.
Right,
So we cured that a couple weeks ago. So that should alleviate that problem too.
yeah. I mean, overall, I'm very happy with what you're doing with your development, because if there's issues, you try to address it.
We try.
So
Thank you.
I'm not against what you're doing. I just, I like the trail.
See you
and-
around.
I thought nobody recognized me.
All you do when you come up and introduce yourself.
Thanks, Brenda. Any other questions for the applicant from PAC? Any other questions? None being, is there anyone in the audience or online willing to speak for or against this item? Is there anyone in the audience or online willing to speak for or against this item? Third and final time, is there anyone in the audience or online willing to speak for or against this item? None being, would a member of PAC like to put a motion for or against with terms and conditions, please? Kendall.
Recommend PAC provide approval of the Queensbury Heights Phase 15 tentative plan proposing the creation of 11 residential building lots, the extension of Montana Drive, a local government service easement, and a public utility easement with the following recommendations. Number one, the acceptance of the street layout and design for Phase 15. Number two, the acceptance of proposed use of the LPP land bank credit established with Phase 14B. Number three, the requirement of the developer to obtain approval from the Provincial Department of Environment as it relates to construction within the wetland area buffer. And the development officer proposed conditions shall also be included.
Thank you, Kendall. Can I have a seconder on that? Mr. Guest?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Any debate on that motion? None being, can we please vote, please? That motion's carried unanimously in 5 to 7 business days. You have a letter in the mail with your approval. Please work with the town to have all necessary documentation in place, and best of luck. Thank you. We'll move on to item 8. Have a motion to receive and file, but before that, I got a question on that 8 Leiden Drive. That's just a letter indicating, Dwight, that it got approved to commercial? Is that what that?
Yeah, just an update.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Can we have a motion to receive and file, please? Brenda?
So moved.
Thank you. Mark?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Can we have a vote on that, please? That motion's carried unanimously. That being, we'll move on to item 9. Can I have a motion to adjourn? Mr. Bishop?
So moved.
Can I have a seconder on that? Kendall?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Motion carried. Meeting is adjourned.